Okay. So yeah, you can just stay there as long as it's pointed towards the general direction.
I don't think so. It's been a long haul, and we're the session before lunch. Better be interesting.
Right about now, actually. If you pop out and pop back in.
So
I'm happy to-
Josh, Derek, just you know, camera's pointed this way, so we can see you can see the
Wait,
screen.
when can you not see me? Oh, I can see the screen, so I know where I am.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Cool. And this thing is what we'll speak into this.
It'll pick up everything.
It'll. Hello. Tap tap.
Chicago.
If you tend to move out the camera, I'm going to try to follow.
Okay, I'll try not to dance around too
Go
much.
too far.
I'm just going to pop up real quick and introduce. I'm just going to read off of this thing and just remind people that when they're asking questions or giving comments or whatever, to identify themselves in the documentation. Cool. You guys all ready though?
Yeah, we're ready.
All right, guys. Hey, what up? Welcome to Mapping Data. This is the Illinois room, Mapping Data. We're all in the right place. Very, very well. Yeah, first things first. If you're giving comments or asking questions, please, if you will, identify yourself. For documentation purposes, we're trying to get as much information as we can about who's here, who's participating, what's happening. But yeah, otherwise I'll leave it to, we have Derek EDER here, a partner over at DataMade, Mike REILLEY, a professor at DePaul University with the Red Line Project, and Josh Kalov, founder of Kalov Strategies. Yeah, without further ado.
All right, awesome. Thanks, guys. So I was going to start. There's 3 of us. We have about an hour and 15 minutes, I'm told, and we're the session right before lunch. So we have all of these things going for us. If we end out early, maybe you guys will get to go get food first. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to start, but I guess first I'll give you guys a little bit of background about me and why I am known for doing map stuff. I didn't really set out to be known for doing map stuff, but for some reason I've now become the sort of de facto fusion tables guy, even though I don't work for Google and they've never paid me any money. They sent me a hat in the mail one time, which is like consolation. Yeah, right. I was like, okay, great. So I got started with fusion tables because I was working on a project here in Chicago, and I had some data in a spreadsheet, and someone was asking me to make a map out of this. And I didn't have a lot of time to do it because at the time I was working, and this was a side project, so I really didn't have a ton of time. They had like a very small budget, and I was like, man, is there like a super easy way to do what I want to do that doesn't involve a bunch of programming and stuff? So I Googled it, and I found there's a thing called Google Fusion Tables. And so I'll show you guys some of the stuff that is built around that. I kind of have a whole talk that I can give on that, but I'm going to not do all of it. I'm just going to give you guys the highlights. And then I think Josh was going to talk about some other QGIS type mapping stuff, and Mike's got some stuff he's going to do, also using the fusion tables, but do you have other stuff other than fusion tables? Okay. So we kind of have a lot of experience in mapping between all 3 of us, but before we dive into any one particular thing, I would like to just sort of see what you guys are interested in. So does anybody just want to share like what kind of problems they have with mapping, or what they really want to learn? Is the stuff we have on this list adequate? I want to hear from you before we just go off on a tangent for now. Yeah.
A lot of the stuff on the government data portals is a combination of Google Fusion tables and shape files and a few other things.
Mm-hmm.
Great to figure out how to deal with the multiplicity.
Different formats? Yeah, okay, cool. Anybody else? Other stuff?
I don't see a large camera. Is this being recorded?
Small camera.
Small camera.
I mean, this is not being streamed.
It's being streamed. Yeah. Okay. Do you have secret data you'd like to map?
Yours.
I just wanted to know if this was going to be available.
Yeah, sure.
The other ones have large cameras.
Yeah, and we'll also try to point you guys to some resources as well for doing all this stuff on top of that. Yeah.
I know the top mapping is mapping data, and people think it's geographic mapping when they say that.
Yeah.
Are you guys dabbling with social network analysis mapping?
No, I mean, you can do that, but that's a separate thing. Do social network analysis, which is like pretty hard, and then you get data out of that, and then you can map it. And that's kind of what we're focusing on for this. But we treat it just like any other data. It's just data that has some sort of location attribute to it. You can map it. Right? So, anything else? No? Come on.
Just generally, I'm interested in maps that help people construct and broaden their own mental maps of the world rather than just outsourcing your thinking about maps to an external resource.
Oh, okay, so you want people to do the mapping themselves?
To learn
Okay,
from
cool.
the maps. And
You're in the right room. Awesome. Anybody else? I need one more. Somebody give me one more thing, and then we'll move on. No? In the back. Oh, two more things. All right.
I'm Dave Bill from YouTube, and similar along the same sort of lines, but really having youth actually create maps, doing the data collection,
Okay.
having them generate the maps. So trying to identify ways to put that in simple language to kind of guide them in the map
Okay.
generation process.
Okay, cool. And sorry, right here. Yeah.
I was just going to say the Google Fusion tables is great for me. The GIS system at our university is difficult to get access to. It's only in one lab. And so this would be something that students could use without having to get access to the lab.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, I think that's great. Thanks for all that. I think I will start with just showing you guys some Fusion tables maps just so you can see what we can do. And then, guys, please stop me. Give me a timer or something because I could go on. So I'll start with some examples because it's always, I think, always better to show rather than tell. So I'm with a couple of groups here. One of them is called Open City. We run the OpenGov Hack Night, which was mentioned in the last session. You guys were here, which is every Tuesday. So a lot of the stuff we've done with this group, it actually is mapping, not exclusively. I mean, it's mostly, the thing that ties all this stuff together is working with open government data here in Chicago. But oftentimes there's some really interesting stuff that you can do with that and on a map. So I'll show you, let's see here. This is a pretty good one as sort of like a starter about what you can do with Fusion tables. So this is something that I'm sure has been discussed already at this conference. This is a map of vacant buildings here in Chicago. These are reported to Chicago's 311 system. So this is people calling in to the city on 311 or filing a report on some sort of form. And then the city collects that information and they publish it on the city's data portal. Does everybody know about the open data portal? You've already been over this? Okay. If you don't know about it, you really should, because that is a really great place to get data. It's just data.cityofchicago.org. Cook County also has one, which Josh is very involved in. It's data.cookcountyil.gov. Yeah. And then there's a state data portal, and there's a federal data portal. I mean, everybody's got a data portal now, and it's really awesome if you know where to look for it, right? If you know where these different data portals are. So this data comes from 311, and it's actually just a spreadsheet of data. I'll show you what it started with. Let's see here. I can find, where did I get my data from? It's always good to have good about pages describing what you're doing. Here. So this is a link to the city's data portal, and this is actually what's driving this map. It's just a spreadsheet. If you want to kind of see this view here, you got some columns, you've got a name, you've got a service request ID and a date, and then all the way over here, which is typically where it is on the Chicago's data portal, we have these things, latitude and longitude. Does anybody know what those two words mean or what they are? I mean, I'm starting with the basics. Is this too basic? Who doesn't? I mean, I'm going to tell you anyways, but wait, maybe someone wants to tell us. What's latitude and longitude? Anybody know? Nobody knows?
Geographical coordinates on the Earth.
It's like a point on the Earth, right? So computers are dumb. When you say, I'm at the Willis Tower, it's not going to know what you're talking about. It needs very precise information, which is what latitude and longitude gives us. There's other ways to represent where things are in the world. Latitude and longitude is one of them. It's like a crosshairs. Here you are in the world, right? So the city of Chicago has done us an awesome favor. They've geocoded all of our data for us, which means geocoding is taking something like the Willis Tower, Chicago, Illinois, and turning it into a latitude and longitude. For now, we're not going to get into that. You can consider that magic, because it's kind of complicated. But there's that's like a solved problem for there's tools to help us do that. Fusion tables is actually one of them. So I actually get this data from the city of Chicago, and then I load it into a Fusion table, which is really just like a spreadsheet. So I'll show you what that looks like. Going back to my website here, I have the data in a Fusion table. So I kind of move it from one place to another, because I do a little bit of manipulation with the data to clean it up a little bit, get it into a format that's useful for me. And I've moved it into this other place. So this right here, you're looking at, this is Fusion tables, at least a view of Fusion tables, right? It's very much the same kind of thing you saw in the city's data portal, except this is a thing that I kind of have edit control over, and I can do stuff with it now that it's in Fusion tables. Specifically, I can make a map out of it. So you'll see I still have all my columns that were in the other one. And, oops, this is a weird interface. I will say that the Fusion tables interface is not my favorite.
To get to Fusion tables to begin with,
Yeah.
just go to google.com/fusion
Yeah,
tables.
so I don't have a ton of time to walk you through the whole process, but the way you do it is basically if you have a Google account, Gmail, it's actually tied into your Google Drive. So when you're in Google Drive, you can actually create a new Fusion table just like you would a spreadsheet or a document or a presentation. The way that they've set it up is it's actually like a plugin, an add-on to your Google Drive. So when you click that red Create button, it's not going to show up by default. You have to go add it. So there's a little like add, get more stuff option in Google Drive. You can say go and search for Fusion tables and add it to your Google Drive, and we'll add it. And then you can create it just like you can anything else. I'm not signed into Google right now, so I don't think I have time to go into exactly how to do that, but we can
figure it out.
Yeah. So this data is sitting in here. It's like a table. And one of the really cool things you can do, and I'd say probably the coolest thing you can do with Fusion tables, is just make a map out of it. So if you give Fusion tables some information that has any kind of location attribute, that could be latitude, longitude. As Adam mentioned, the city also provides shape files. Do you guys know what shape files are? So, huh? Oh yeah? So that is, yeah, so shapefile is, that name is actually like owned by Esri. It's a format. But it's also, I think people use it as a term to describe sort of geographical data. So a point is just a latitude and longitude, right? But sometimes you want to have things that are more than just a point. You want to show like maybe a boundary, maybe like a ward boundary or a community boundary or the boundary of the United States of America, right? To do that, you actually need something that's more complicated than just one point. You need many points, and you need to connect the dots, right? And that's actually how it does it. A shapefile is actually just a collection of points that makes up a shape. And it could be a shape or it could be a line, because sometimes that's useful too. That's a different kind of shape. And it's really just smart enough to connect all the dots for you. And then things like Esri and shapefiles can store additional information to that actual shapefile. So when you go to the city's data portal and download a shapefile, it could be shape.shp is like the extension. KML is another kind of shapefile that is, I believe, owned by Google. That's another format. And they both represent geographical data. Fusion tables, unfortunately, only understands KML. It does not natively understand shapefiles. Josh can get into that maybe in his section, because there's sometimes to get the data in the format you want, you need to kind of do some converting. But also you can take like a spreadsheet, right? So in the case of this vacant building data, it's actually just like tabular data. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. You can download it in Excel. You can download it as a comma-separated values. And Fusion tables also can accept this kind of data. And if it has a column called latitude and a column called longitude, it'll know to map that. So it's actually got some really cool stuff built into it, and it'll kind of try to auto-detect what's going on inside of your data to say, oh, is there information here about location? If there is, then you can actually just say, hey, I want to make a map out of that. And you literally just click like make a map in Fusion tables once your data's in there. And it will, if it needs to geocode stuff, it'll automatically geocode stuff. So you can give it addresses, and it'll geocode that for you. You can give it intersections, basically anything you can throw into Google address search, like when you go to maps.google.com, it'll be able to geocode that. And so that's actually one of the really valuable things about Fusion Tables is if you have data and it's not already geocoded for you, Fusion Tables is a way to get your data geocoded without that sort of hassle. It'll do it automatically for you. So here's a map, and this is a map of my data. And for some reason, it started very zoomed out. Ah, we're getting closer. Here is a bunch of dots on a map. This is a kind of a depressing view. This is every vacant building reported to 311 over, I believe, since 2010, so almost a 4-year period. You'll notice on my map here, if I go back to it here, I'll get another tab, Chicago buildings. I don't show exactly that, right? I've got this, kind of ignore the community boundaries for now. That's actually a separate table. But this is the same data. This is the same as this. I've just filtered the data. I've said, only give me stuff within the last 90 days. This is everything because this is like, hey, here's all your data, just like looking at the entire spreadsheet. What Fusion Tables also lets you do, once you've mapped it, is you can filter it and say, hey, I only want stuff that is newer than or within the last 90 days. And I've built using this sort of open source tool that I've released called the Searchable Map Template. I've built some tools for people to create those filters on their own. So every set of data has its own kind of interesting things you want to filter on. And I've just sort of built a framework that anybody can then take a Fusion table and then create their own filters and make a map very much just like this one. So for this example, all right, I have a thing called date reported. And I created a little slider that says, give me, everything between these two date ranges. And it shows you just that data. And I can also do other things like, what's the address here? Here, I'll just do this. Tower, Chicago. Will it find it? Nope. You can also do what, basically address searches as well, which is another really cool thing that comes out of the box of Fusion Tables. You can say, given a place, another latitude and longitude on the map, find me everything within a certain distance of that point, right? So within a mile, within, a couple blocks. In this case, I'm doing half a mile. So this is the kind of stuff you can do with Fusion Tables. Should I stop here so Mike can show some other stuff?
If you want me to jump in, great. If not, go ahead and keep going.
I don't want to
We got plenty of time.
So, okay, I'm going to stop. Questions? Yes.
Can you do this? Can you show like vector information, like how many vacant buildings are in a ward with another?
So Fusion Tables is for presenting map data. It's not for sort of doing those calculations for you. Basically, you have to, I would say, do those calculations on your own with another tool first, and then upload sort of the finished sort of calculated data to Fusion Tables, and then it will show up for you. But it doesn't really do any sort of on-the-fly
color
calculation.
code or something like that.
You can color code data that's already in there. That's actually how I'm doing these dots here. You notice how there's some different colors going on here. There's a yellow, there's blue, I have some green. It's hard to tell this out. You can color it based on the data you've given it. So I have, in this case, vacant buildings. There's a different kind of status for each one. And I've said, okay, buildings that have not been properly boarded up, color those blue. Ones that have been properly boarded up, color that green. And ones where we don't have any information, color it yellow. And I really just, that's all just in the data, and I'm saying based on that information, color the dots, right? But you can do that, like imagine you can do that for anything you want, right? Any column, any value, as long as it's like less than like 4 or 5 different values, because like you don't want to put like a rainbow on your map. Yeah.
From the table, can you tell, you said that geocoding happens automatically, what hasn't gotten geocoded?
Sorry,
like what addresses have been popped out or bad addresses that have been
So yeah, it gives you some information about how the geocoding process has gone, and it tells you which ones it's like unsure about when it goes through that process. So
and
it'll
that
show
gets
you.
back added to the Fusion.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's not super awesome about it is they don't give you the latitude longitude back. It's just sort of saved in the Fusion table because Google sells the geocoding service.
Yeah.
And so this would be a way to get around that service because you can actually geocode up to like 100,000 points.
You can find out, but it has some sort of flag or something.
Yeah, it'll tell you it's been
didn't
geocoded.
show up on the map.
Yeah, right. And you can also look at the map and like, oh, this what often happens in Chicago is you'll get data that gets accidentally geocoded in Chicago Heights or East Chicago, right? Because the word Chicago is in that name, right? That happens. And geocoding is sometimes like you're not going to get even Google gets it wrong, as you've probably already experienced using Google Maps. Yeah, in the back.
I'm a little spoiled, I think, with you from having used CartoDB.
Yes.
Which is amenable to all manner of files.
Yes.
And very good and very efficient.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So let's just say I've done some work in Carto.
Yeah.
I know I need to actually get some of these works. Do you know anything about the sort of, exporting and transferability?
Yeah. So first of all, CartoDB is awesome. I use it also. It's actually, I would call it like a competitor to Fusion Tables. Fusion Tables is free up to a certain limit. You can have, like, I'd say up to 100,000 points of data in there for free, but they cap you at that much. CartoDB is a for-profit company, and they actually charge you, but you can go beyond those limits, right? And so it's actually, and they are built on sort of different kinds of stacks, but they do very much the same stuff. Both of them will allow you to export your data into various formats. So if you want to, anybody can do this right now. If you want to download my vacant building data, you can just say File, Download, and it'll give it to you.
My specific question is education. If I downloaded a merged table,
Yeah.
that involves a lot of different types of files.
It'll give you the merged. Yeah, so when you merge stuff, and you can, which is an operation you can do in Fusion Tables, you can say, here's one Fusion table, here's another one, make a third Fusion table that's a merge of both. You can export the merged one.
I'm talking about exporting Carto.
Yeah.
And importing into an open source tool. Is there any implications for that? Because Carto, it sounds like file-wise,
Yeah.
is more fluid sort of capability.
Oh, okay. I mean, not quite. I guess like the thing is, you can get the data out of both of them. I guess I'm not sure what exactly.
I thought you could a certain type of location type.
It takes KML files. Is the type of shape file it understands. That's just what sort of formats it accepts. Does CartoDB take a shape file? Accept shape files? Yeah. So those are differences, right? Let's talk after.
There's an easy online browser-based website called Shape Escape.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Transfer between shapefile to KML.
Yeah, you can do that.
If you have art, if you have a subscription to art, and I think Carto has this compatibility, you can do the opposite, which is KML. So that exists, but it doesn't happen automatically.
Right.
You can use
GeoJSON.io accepts and exports anything. It's like drag and drop.
What's it called?
GeoJSON.
Oh, that's an awesome. Yeah, that's an awesome tool.
Yeah, it's like omnivorous format.
Yeah. This is made by a guy named Tom Macwright, who works at Mapbox, which is another really awesome mapping company. Yeah.
Are you able to set up dynamic connections between the Fusion tables and the Socratic database through their APIs, or does that?
Yeah. So to do the vacant building example I showed you, I actually wrote a little script that every night goes and downloads all the data from Socrata using their API, and then I do some manipulations of the data, and I load the things into Fusion tables. The big thing I'm doing is I'm saying, oftentimes places in this particular the vacant building data, places will get reported multiple times. I want to make sure that I have just one point for every address, and I only want the most recent information. So I do some checking to say, oh, if I've seen this point already, if I have updated, if I haven't added. So I do stuff like that. That's all I had to write custom code to do that. There's not like a generic tool that I'm aware of that does that.
Okay. Are you willing to share some of that code?
Oh, everything is open source. Yeah, that's another one of my things. Everything's open source.
So that's refreshed daily?
Daily, correct. Because the city's data, I know, is also refreshed daily. Yes. But yeah, all the code is on GitHub.
Okay. We also have an OData connector on there.
Yeah.
Make sure you have the most recent.
Yeah. So this is the code for the map. This is the code for the import script.
Okay.
And I linked to it on the Chicago Building site. And actually, while I'm at it, I'll just, and this might be a good jumping off point for Mike. This is the searchable map template I was mentioning. I built tools like the vacant building finder, and I kind of was like, man, this is like useful for me. I want to make, like, this is actually something I can make it as a generic tool that anybody can use. And so that's what this is. It's all on GitHub. It looks like this now. It's a little fancier. And I have like tutorials on how to add checkboxes or radio buttons and all that stuff. But it gives you address search for free, like right out of the box. So again, I can be like, this example data is recycling drop-off centers in Chicago. And so I can say Willis Tower. Oh, look, I've even got the Places API working on here. Chicago. Ooh, boom. So, and this is a little joke I had, which is I was upset at the lack of recycling, so I said, you just dump it off in City Hall. So anyways, this is all open source. It's all on GitHub as well. And other people, like quite a few people in fact, have made lots of maps. It's popular with journalists specifically because it's making a map for free, costs no money. I don't have to necessarily know how to do a ton of programming. You need to know some like HTML, JavaScript. And you can do it pretty quick, right? So journalists have deadlines and things like that too. So if, yeah, this is where it is on GitHub. Should I stop here? I'll stop here. But I'll answer other questions if they come up. Mike?
Thanks. Kind of feel like if this was a rock concert, here's your two headlining bands, and I'm like the local house band that gets up and plays a couple songs, and it's like, yeah, kid, get off the stage. So I'll be brief, like a good news lead. I'll be brief. My name's Mike REILLEY. I teach journalism at DePaul University. I've been there 7 years. Taught previously at Northwestern for 4 years. I come from a background in newspapers a long time ago in the 80s. But I'm an early adopter of web technologies. I was one of the founders of ChicagoTribune.com, one of the 11 founding editors in '95. It had grown along with the web. That was back in the days when we only had HTML. We didn't have all these great content management systems and things like that. What I'm going to show you is kind of taking what Derek has done and how we take and use it in journalism. I bring Derek in to speak to a lot of my classes. And he trains them on Fusion tables. I do a little bit with Fusion tables with them, but then he takes them to the next level with really that searchable map template, which is just a wonderful tool. It's so easy to use. Even a 48-year-old bald guy can learn to use it. So I encourage you to take some time at derekeder.com, download that searchable map template. It's entering an access code and a map. And basically it's cutting and pasting two things in, and you've got this killer searchable map that you can do some really cool stuff with. My students and I published to a website called the Redline Project, and this is it. It's a redlineproject.org. It was founded 3.5 years ago, almost 4 now, in an online journalism 2 class. This was a group of 18 journalism students, seniors and juniors. One of the students that was in that group that founded the website is sitting right here. This is Allie Trumbull. She's the documenter for today's session. And they built this wonderful little website that covers news in Chicago neighborhoods. And we had to find kind of a way to narrow down, there's a lot of neighborhoods in Chicago. So we narrowed it down to neighborhoods that border Chicago's Red Line L stops. Chicago's a city of neighborhoods. We thought it was a great way to organize it. We redesigned it just under a year ago to be a page that works with Bootstrap, and it's responsive, so it works on mobile devices. So it looks good on laptop, desktop, phone, iPad, you name it. We do a lot of work with data and various other tools and resources, a lot of social media here. We're right in the middle of a project right now using data on the elections, a lot of election preview stuff. Data wrapper, we're doing a lot with Tablet Public. In Google Fusion tables, we're building a lot of maps, of course, because those are great for elections. But when we first started building maps, we brought Derek in, and he worked with a group of 5 or 6 students who really had a strong interest in learning this, and we found it was very successful, so we continued to bring him back, and we have more and more students learning this now. And this is our first searchable map template. It was built by a guy by the name of Clayton Geis, who is now building these full-time at the Chicago Sun-Times. This is what Clayton does pretty much 24/7. And this was a homicides map. This is 2012 homicides And we mapped it by Chicago wards, political wards. We've got another one I'll show you in a minute that's mapped by police district beats. What I was able to do with this project, we had a series of stories that kind of built off of these maps, is we teach students in journalism school to ask questions of sources, interview people, who, what, when, where, why, how, and how much. Any good news story will have those questions answered in it. Those questions that journalists ask of sources are many of the same questions we ask as builders and people that are building maps: who, what, when, where, why, how, and how much. And Searchable Map Template really lets us ask those types of questions. And some of you may remember this a little over a year ago, Cornell Square Park. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Cornell Square Park. It's a site of a mass shooting in Chicago last year. We'll narrow down these. 13 people were shot, including several children. Miraculously, all of them lived. Thank goodness. But I just mapped, using Searchable Map Templates, Cornell Square Park, and I shot within a radius of 2 miles here, and I found ages of victims, 24 and under. There were 40 results. So in 2012, 40 people were shot within a couple miles of this park. And I can go through and click on each one of these dots, and it gives me ages and some basic demographic information about them, type of weapon used, things like that. Very, very important. We used this story about Cornell Square Park broke right around 9:30, right before your 10 o'clock news came on. And Clayton, who built this map, I called him up the minute the story came across the news ticker, and I go, let's pull up the maps and see what we can learn about this. So while a lot of the reporters from the local TV stations, the Tribune sometimes, were down covering the shooting, we were working on the back end to learn more about the history of this area around this park. It was some heartbreaking stuff. I mean, so many victims under the age of 18 that were shot and killed, or knife or whatever weapon that was used near this park. We did 2012 here, and we also have a 2013 map that we did by police district beat. And all this information, you can find it on the homicides data up on the Chicago Police Department's website. I don't have the URL off the top of my head, but you can also pull it off of the city's data portal. This is the other one. This is the 2013 police district beats. As you can see, there's 435 results. So we pull that data off the city's data portal and off of the police district or the Chicago Police Department site. We also scrub it. We also cross-match it against a database that's created by Chicago Tribune's Red Eye. If you maybe look in their little Red Eye section, they have the homicide tracker that Tracy Swartz does. She tracks them as well. So we cross-match the two to make sure they match up. Sometimes they don't agree. And this has to do with, the police department has various classifications of different, is it a homicide, is it a murder? Are we still investigating it? And there's been many, many stories written about how that process works. But we use that as kind of a catch-all to make sure we're getting a good, fresh data that's accurate as well. But we started building these maps, and it was nice when we put them up and launched them with our big projects each year. We do something on homicide totals and homicide stats every year. But circling back then, during breaking news, is when we really find the value of this. This is when it becomes a great tool, not only for journalists, but for citizens. If I'm buying a home in a certain area, I want to be able to go in and see, hey, is it safe around my neighborhood? We did one last year, too, with L-stops. We took and used a KML file of all the CTA train stops. And it's got all the little maps or little routes of the trains and stuff. And then we started mapping it against robbery, theft databases, assaults, and things like that. So people can go in and search that map and find, hey, this isn't the greatest area in, or I'm moving to, or I'm getting off this train stop right here, and it might not be a good idea for me to walk home from here. Maybe I should take a cab. And that was kind of feedback we were getting from our readers and visitors to the website. During this past summer, we landed a McCormick Foundation grant of $20,000. And it's been a great relief to my bank account, because I funded the Red Line project out of my own pocket. And when I want to bring Derek or somebody in, or Josh or somebody into class, I pay for it out of my own pocket. The school doesn't do that. So thank God bless the McCormick people for doing this, because they gave us an opportunity to really do this at a higher level. And starting in October and really kicking in after the first of the year, we're going to start doing a lot of these different events, training on CartoDB I heard mentioned earlier, more with fusion tables, anything we can get our hands on. And I'll be able to bring them in and train them, not just DePaul students, but anybody that wants to attend. Journalists, we're trying to pair up the students with various journalists to work on projects. And one of those projects that we did that led to this grant was this silly little Tumblr blog called the Chicago Stumbler. And all we've done with this is given students the Tumblr app on their phone. They go around, they document all the crappy sidewalks in Chicago. We have seen all these Tumblrs and websites about potholes. Well, the sidewalks in Chicago suck too. We've documented over 200 crappy sidewalks, broken sidewalks in this city. And we're just publishing them to this little Tumblr blog. But we circled back and we started mapping them. We started creating maps of them as well, and locations. So go right here, and this is just a simple Google Maps engine, but those are some of the neighborhoods, and you can find where the crappy sidewalks are. About a year ago, Chris Coffey from NBC5 investigative reporter, called me up, and he goes, I love that blog. He goes, I'm going to do a series of stories on crappy sidewalks in Chicago. He goes, can we go out and talk with some of your students and work with you on this? I go, great. We also started pulling public records, and we had to FOIA and get all of the complaints, 311 complaints. You can call it 311, complain about graffiti in your neighborhood, things like that. How many 311 complaints in the past year do you think there's been to the city about bad sidewalks? Off the top of your head, can you guess?
1,000, 100.
10,550. Okay, and less than 10% of those sidewalks have been repaired in 1 year. So they're desperately behind. So we pulled that data, and we were able to do some mapping with that, and really just some really fun sorting and filtering and pivot tables to come up with some really nice research on it. But it's all because of this silly little WordPress or Tumblr blog that we were able to build this bigger project, and we did 2 TV pieces for NBC5 on it. We've mapped it. It's all up there on chicagostumbler.tumblr.com. And I think that project unto itself, and as simple as it was, really kind of caught the eye of the folks at McCormick and some of the other places, and said, hey, we can take and do these really cool things if we train people on basic mapping skills, mobile journalism skills, and really tell stories in unique and different ways. I will show you one other little thing we've worked on, and we use, God bless the Knight folks at Northwestern for building these great tools. They have,
Oh, Mike, I think there's a question.
Rolling, yeah, question, yeah.
Just before you move on, I was wondering, could you talk about the content of journalism that your students reported on in terms of the implications of that?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I've got a great one. Yeah, the ADA folks were all over it. We also, whenever we geolocate the locations of the sidewalks, that's part of their requirements. So when they write the little blurb, they have to put the exact address. We also post, a call to action. So if you don't like what you see, you can dial 311 and report it, or contact your alderman. And we put the link to the alderman. We have them search the map and see, okay, this happened in the 43rd Ward, which I think is what, Michelle Smith, Lincoln Park. Contact Michelle Smith. Here's her contact information. We have tweeted the broken sidewalks at the alderman and say, hey, fix this. The one that originally started this whole project was when I rolled my ankle in, right around the Sheridan Red Line stop. I live right across the street from that. And they finally fixed it. It took a year and a half for them to get to it. But they finally got to it, but that was constantly reporting it and things like that. As far as the crime maps, the blowback from that is typically, we had a lot of fun with the ward maps, because we would go and talk to the alderman then, hey, wait a minute, your ward has had, X number of homicides in the past year. What's being done about that? Is community policing stepping up, whatever. Same with police district beats. Take a look at District 7 in that 2013 map. There's a lot of action there. So it helps us to kind of get a broad view of what's happening in that certain area. And those KML files, you can call them up on the city data portal, the wards, neighborhoods, oh God, there's the police district beats,
the beats too,
yeah, the beats, all these things. It's just, all you're doing is layering it over your spreadsheet, and God, there's just a wealth of information. So in a nutshell, those were a couple. That's a good question. What do you do with the data once you get it? Well, then you can go out and do some reporting off of it. Not only have you built a great tool for the public to use and your readers to use, but also for you to use as a reporter to research, gather information, then go ask questions about it and get reaction from sources. We're doing that right now with a lot of the election data as well. Dick Simpson over at UIC is a big former alderman here, comments on all the time on political issues. We take a lot of our data to him, and he helps us sort through it. She mentioned GIS earlier with universities. We're also recruiting some of our students out of our geography department to come in and take some journalism classes. I've got a couple of them this quarter. They're very good at cartography and reading maps. Surprisingly, our geography department doesn't train students on Google Fusion tables. They're very good with ARC and GIS and things like that. But we have the training for Google Fusion tables, so we bring them over and give them some of those skills. And we're finding that that's been a very, very nice little relationship that's just kind of blossomed out of me having beers with Ewan Haig, the geography chair. Yeah, it's a really, really cool thing. This is a map that we built off of using StoryMap.js, which is one of the Night Lab tools. You use it off of Google Drive. You log into Google Drive, and then you call up the storymap.nightlab.com, I believe is the address. And we did this one. We've done a lot of them based here in Chicago. We did one with sidewalks. We did one with rising rent prices around both Chicago and around the country. But it's really easy to build these cool little story maps. And we did this one. This was a preview of the World Cup. And we wanted to create little profiles of each of the countries and the teams and stuff. And we could have done that and put it, in HTML and a little page with a photo, and it would have looked nice. But we thought, with it being the World Cup, boom, we just build a little story map. So there's Argentina, second place. Germany wins it. So we just had people kind of hop around the globe. And as you can see, the little bio information's down here. The world ranking, players to watch, and so on and so on and so on. Very simple tool. I trained the students on this in about 20 minutes. What is it we map? We map America's drunkest cities. Some pseudoscience. They love it. It's a fun little tool to use, and we try and give them something interesting and fun to use. But then we turn them loose with, okay, come up with your own ideas. And 2 students came up with this in a sports writing class. So you can teach this stuff to students at various levels. High school kids can do this stuff. You just have to take a little bit of time to teach them. Questions, and then I'll hand it off to Josh because he's got some really cool stuff to show.
Can you mention again, you said Story Night?
Storymap.nightlab.com.
If you Google StoryMap.js,
it'll show up. Great tool. They have another tool called Timeline.js as well that's really good at building timelines. It's all basically off of a spreadsheet, a Google sheet. That's all it is. It's really, really fun stuff. What else? Anything else? All
I just
right.
want to make a
house
comment
band's done.
though, real quick. So all the stuff that Mike talked about, there's a ton of work that goes into making these stories, these maps, and the technology for making these maps is getting easier and easier all the time. Right? So Fusion Tables and CartoDB are examples of these tools that anybody can use. Really, you don't have to know how to program it all. Right? There used to be maybe 5 years ago, you'd have to hire a professional GIS person to do this work, and now you don't need that. And it frees you up to go do the actual hard work, which is like making sense of it, right? The harder question is, what should I map? Not, let's like throw dots on a map, right? So you can just like go do sort of pointless things with this stuff, but really this frees you up, these technologies free you up to really work on the hard stuff, the stuff that computers will never know how to do for you, right? Which is like, what is the story? What's the important thing to point out here? So yeah, just want to highlight that.
We've got students doing original research too. We're mapping a stretch of Irving Park Road from the Sheridan Red Line stop over to the expressway. Because we've noticed just driving down that road, I drive that road quite a bit, all the empty storefronts there, the small local mom and pop shops that have closed along there. And we've done research, nobody's done this before. We're going through and actually having students go through and canvass those areas to document which addresses have empty store and abandoned storefronts now. I found nothing in the data portal, anything like that. So original research, we're building a spreadsheet on that. We'll launch it sometime this winter. And then, again, start going to the congressman for that area and asking them questions, the neighborhood associations and asking them questions about this. Why are all these abandoned storefronts there? What's being done with them? Do you have increasing crime problems in this area because of this? I mean, it's just saddening to see, you walk both sides of the street, just empty storefront after empty storefront. And it's kind of the sign of the times, with small business in Chicago. So anyway, that's it. I'll pass it off to Josh now.
Cool. Alright. So how many people have heard of or used, well, it was mentioned earlier, but Esri's ArcGIS Desktop? Okay, a lot of people. So one of the things that people mentioned in the survey results was about cost of tools like that. So I'm going to show some alternatives to ArcGIS. So this is ArcGIS Desktop. If you don't know what it is, it's a desktop tool to do GIS and spatial analysis and manipulate data to make maps. And it's used a lot in government and big corporations and academia. But it's expensive. It's cost prohibitive for a lot of organizations. So there's also QGIS, Quantum GIS, which is open source version. So with this tool, you can do a lot of similar things with data, and I've got a couple examples of that. So I went to the city's data portal, and I downloaded Chicago Public Schools locations for this year, and downloaded a shapefile, and then I added it into this. This is QGIS. It's a desktop software you can download. It's open source. So I added the school locations. And so this is all the locations of Chicago Public Schools. So with this data, with QGIS, you can do all sorts of things. You can do analysis, looking for locations or things like that. So here is OpenStreetMap, which was mentioned before, which is a source to get kind of like Google Maps, but it's crowdsourced updates. So now I've got school locations. That's hard to tell. School locations on top of the streets. So I don't know who's from Chicago in the city, but one thing Chicago Public Schools has been doing is safe passage routes around schools. So another data set that I found on the portal is kind of information on how they actually did that. And this shows, this data set, Safe Passages, kind of shows how they came up with the routes. And what they did was they took these locations of where schools are and basically used a buffer. And I'm sure they probably did it in ArcGIS, but it's something you can do pretty easily in here too. And so you can see the distance. I'm not sure what distance or criteria they used, but this is how they kind of developed what streets the safe routes would be on. So that's something you can do with QGIS also. Another area where QGIS is great, maybe more so than the web mapping, is being able to create printable maps. Or if you were here for Terry's keynote this morning, he had a lot of maps in his PowerPoint, so that's another area. So there's a whole composer tool in this that allows you to make maps and add legends and do all sorts of annotation and titles, and then print out a PDF or save it as a JPEG or anything like that. So that's a
the really great thing that desktop software can do.
I saw that you had the OpenStreetMaps in there.
Yeah.
Do you start by importing that in, or is that part of
That's actually using, so one of the nice things about QGIS, and a lot of open source software, it's driven by plugins that people build. So I pulled an OpenStreetMap using a plugin. It's an Open Layers plugin. So Open Layers is an open source tool. Originally started for like web mapping, but what this is that somebody built essentially Open Layers into QGIS, and then allows you to bring in OpenStreetMap or Google Maps or Bing Maps as a background pretty easily. So you can just bring in anyone. So we can. So yeah, that's great. Yeah. So what was that? So another thing that came up before is KML and shapefiles. So one other really nice thing that you can do really easily in QGIS is transfer between those formats. So I downloaded shapefiles off the data portal. But let's say we wanted to resave something as a KML. So let's say we wanted to resave the school locations. We just click to get the menu here, and you can go to Save As. And all you have to do is change what format you want. So you can resave data in a number of formats, KML being one of them. And that's, it's super easy. Also, if you know anything about projections, you can reproject data really easily using this. And there's tons of other plugins too. So Graphs, which is a GIS tool that's been developed since the 80s. There's a 1987 video of William Shatner narrating about graphs on YouTube you can find. It's now built into QGIS. It can do tons of spatial analysis and things like that. Yeah, so that's QGIS, and it's open source, so it's a good alternative for if you don't have access to a lab or don't have the ability to get ESRI licenses.
Are there any major drawbacks or features it doesn't do?
I mean, one of the drawbacks, besides user interface, sometimes a little difficult. Some of the things are, plugin driven, so knowing about plugins, they have a pretty nice plugin search utility now. It does a lot. I mean, it does, it depends if you're comparing to what level of like ESRI's ArcGIS. It definitely has more built in than their lowest license levels. Yeah.
Esri has a hobbyist license.
Okay.
For a hobbyist license, for $100, you get the desktop. It has some limitations. The biggest one of which is you cannot produce and sell. But it's not well publicized on the site. I happened to stumble across it 2 years ago.
Okay.
But it is the desktop, ArcGIS desktop, a hobbyist license, $100 a year.
How does that compare to their the free tool they have?
The free tool has severe limitations. Once you work with the ArcGIS desktop, when you go to the free tool, you'll see the limitations of it. But I've used this as well, and if you're using the real high-end Esri stuff, then this kind of falls short because of the user interface and the way you have to do it. But if you're just using sort of that basic Esri stuff, check out the hobby.
Yeah. I just wanted to piggyback on the drawbacks question and make just a quick comment. Because I use ArcMap stuff at work every day, and I've actually started transitioning everything to QGIS just because I actually find it much easier to use. But one of the drawbacks originally was I wasn't really used to thinking about projections as carefully when I was loading in multiple data sets. And some of the spatial tools in QGIS are a little more sensitive to having your your projection's all correct. So that was like the initial drawback, but I think it's actually a benefit because if you're going to be doing analysis, you should really think about your projections. And it's a little too high level, too detailed for this talk, but that was one kind of drawback turned into a benefit when I started switching over to QGIS.
That's true.
And it's way easier to reproject than QGIS too.
It is. That is really super easy. Yeah.
And so, sorry, do people know what projections are? Just like, maybe like spend like 30 seconds describing it.
Yeah.
You live on a sphere, and maps that we've been showing you are flat. And so there's some calculations that go in to make sure that that's correct. So latitude and longitude is one projection, one representation of it, but it gets flawed as you pull away.
So latitude and longitude is usually WGS 84, which is what all the web mapping is usually done in. But if you're working locally, you want to work with something that's set up so that distance and everything is more accurate. So here in Illinois, especially in this area, usually governments will be using Illinois State Plane East.
That's right.
And there's like a feet version and a meters version. So that's usually, if you're doing real, more in-depth analysis, you're going to most likely project to something that's more locally centered.
Yeah. So Illinois State Plane East is just like a point, and they've calibrated the data to that point, which means if you loaded some data in Australia that was in that projection, it would look weird. It would look wrong. So that's why it matters.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
What are some of the output formats from QGIS?
Well, for data, you mean for like the data or?
Yeah, like could you get it to operate within a web page in some capacity?
So it's really not for that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a handoff. It's like you do the work in
Right.
this tool, and then you export it into a format like KML, GeoJSON. Those are kind of the two primary like web formats.
Yeah.
And
there
then
might
you
be-
use tools like Fusion Tables and Cartography
Yeah.
that handle all of that. Like it's actually kind of complicated to show a lot of data on a web page, just because it takes a lot. There's a lot going on here. So there's some more magic that those two platforms do to compress the data and present it in a way and give you the interactivity without giving you like gigabytes of data on your web page, because that would like crash your browser.
Yeah. Is there anybody making any sort of web apps that are taking data coming out of a QGIS?
Well,
sort of
I mean, QGIS itself isn't like a database, so it's not storing the data. But there may be a plugin that, so I mean, you can save data, shapefile or KML or anything, or there's plugins to save directly to like a database.
Yeah. Think of it as like a set of tools in a tool chain, right? Like, okay, I need to manipulate some data. I'll open up QGIS and I'll convert it and I'll do my changes and I'll save it. And then I'll move on to the next tool and upload it to Fusion Tables and do the rest, right? But it's like the different parts on the same chain.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Cool. Any other questions about like mapping in general? Did we answer everything? Yeah, in the back.
Yeah, I'll show you. For QGIS or? Yeah, okay.
What was actually available on that page, and the type of file format, and then how it actually
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types. So what I downloaded was actually shape files. So on the data portal, there's a couple of different types. There's like spatial data like this, which is actually, this is a polygon shape data. There's also other data that's tabular data that just has the latitude and longitude. So yeah, this is the network boundaries. So to get the data, just
Yeah, there's a lot on there. There's like 600 different data sets on there.
842.
But there's a lot of duplicates on there too. So some of them are just different views of the same data. So I quote Tom Shank, it's 600 data sets.
From for spatial data, you can download it as KML or shapefile. You can also kind of download the tabular version.
What's original?
Original in this case is usually shapefile.
So the city uploads, this is like a Socrata tool that like you upload your data and then Socrata converts it into many formats.
Yeah, so like,
I try to download the original because sometimes the conversion doesn't work.
that's true.
So always click original.
Yeah, so like on the Cook County site, we have like right here, railroads. Railroad lines in Cook County.
Is that new?
So
I haven't seen that.
it's pretty recent, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago, I think.
The CTA puts up a similar one of all its bus routes and of all its health train lines. Yeah, it's really helpful.
But yeah, this is mostly data in a very kind of raw format. The city does a lot of work to clean it up and put it out here, but I pretty much always have to go in and like make some changes and like format things when I'm ending up making something with it.
The other way is for the city, and we don't really have it on the county website too much, so the city always has the latitude and longitude columns, which Derek
That's kind of
talked
a practice
about.
they follow. There's Tom Shanks in there again. Busy guy. Red light cameras, that's right.
So that's another thing you can do also in QGIS.
Oh yeah, this
If you have a spreadsheet or a CSV that has a latitude and longitude column, you can create a shapefile or just create a map based off of it. So there's this add data from the limited text file, so we can bring in the red light camera locations we just downloaded, and it automatically detected the latitude and longitude field. So just press OK, and now
it's taking a while.
It's building. Yeah,
That's the first thought,
yeah, so these are.
It's probably is that data like a bunch of tickets at the same location?
This
No,
is
that's the
location,
camera
so also
location.
camera location.
They do have that data set though.
Yeah, right.
So that's another thing you can do with QGIS is bring in and build a spatial data set from a tabular data.
I have one. Did you go? I didn't see the menu drop down. Did you do project add data?
Layer.
Layer.
Yeah, it's all layer. Yeah.
And then add delimited text layer. So add vector layer is what you normally be doing if you're bringing in a shapefile or a KML. Raster layer is usually the most common is like imagery, so like the imagery, satellite imagery and things like that. But there's also PostGIS, which is a database, a spatial database. So there's a bunch of different types of data that you can bring in, and there's even more through plugins than what's in the default list.
I know there's probably a lot of answers to this question, but I'm going to do this. And I'm really curious as to what a lot of the sort of the end goal of a lot of this work. Like, is this to like when you're doing this work, are you sending it out to really employed by companies who are using this like as part of their marketing, or there's a lot of things you can do?
Yeah, I mean, so GIS analysis is used for everything. Now, I mean, definitely companies use it for figuring out where to open new places or close places. Demographic analysis, we've done a lot. In a lot of the analysis around looking at health data and area, neighborhood things.
A lot of community organizations too.
Yeah.
They'll come in and they'll hire our geography department at DePaul to come in and do some analysis of the area, very specific planning thing, and they'll pay for that service, for that work.
Putting data to a map is the magic. As long as it's in a table, it's just sitting there doing nothing.
Right. People's eyes
And
closed.
I've watched because I've done some stuff, and I've done some stuff, but I thought it was simple. And I just put it on a map, the eyeballs just snap over. Something about putting it on a map, and suddenly it makes the connection. So it's the basis for a lot of stuff. Not just health, not just business. As soon as you put it on a map, it makes it real to people. So they look for a landmark that they know. And once they find that landmark, then everything else starts to fall apart.
That's totally true. Although maps are not the end-all be-all, right? I mean, sometimes there is no geographical relationship that is of any interest or value. And putting dots on a map can be like, okay, so what, right? So it's a tool, a very important tool, one that I use all the time, all three of us use, and there's whole industries out there that use this sort of tool. But it's one tool out there. There's sometimes, it's not always the answer when it comes to showing data, like visualizing data. But it's a good one.
I've tweeted a lot of resources, both mapping and data visualization to the Shy Data hashtag. So feel free,
We'll
those
also,
pages are full of resources.
We'll also get all the resources. I think Derek's are already up there on the web page for the session. I haven't added mine yet, but
Is there any other resources we want to mention while we're up here?
We have the session notes on the website. So
Okay.
it has a bunch of stuff.
I just want to say Mapbox is another really good
Yeah.
one. We haven't talked about it yet, but they are a company that's built on top of OpenStreetMap data. They do you can do customized map layers with them. They have a tool called Mapbox Studio that lets you do some of the printable map stuff. So you can download very stylized tiles for your city of Chicago map, and then add your own data on top of it. And you can make pretty visually stunning maps, printable maps, or export it to another web interface. They're great. Anything else? Any other app tools? Yeah, question. Or maybe a suggestion.
I had just a few tabs open with some tutorials that I found useful. Would it be helpful to send that?
Yeah,
to the
add them
notes?
to the doc.
yeah, add it to the notes.
That'd be great. Cool. Well, we got 5 minutes before lunch starts. Unless there's anything else, I think we'll call it. Oh yeah, last question.
Derek, you said something earlier I'm not sure I agree with. You said that there are things that computers can't do.
Yeah.
I think computers are going to develop a sense of self-identity in the world before it gets too warm.
Oh, okay. You're banking on the singularity. Is that right? The robots will save us. All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Make sure
Despite not having any.
no advance. Let's throw together a session.
Winging it is feeling prepared. People, I'm glad that. Playing with all of
Mike?
I'm almost afraid to ask because I already know the answer.
Yeah, you're right down the street. We're not leaving.
Tower.
Oh, you're right there.
I have it.
Yeah, you're literally, just about 3 miles.
And I'll send you. We can create a video.
I've seen Microsoft Streets and Groups.
Probably Susan.
Yeah. I think it is. Somebody wanted
Yes, because I remember your name was mentioned on the image. So, yeah, we were in October once. Like next week, they go to conferences in town.
Whenever.
But early October, I'm wide open.
Okay.
I'm down 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursdays are always good because I'm down on this great and stuff.
It's kind of automatic.